They told me my daughter was safe, just not with me. I'm Hannah Reed, 34, and while I was on a 4-day work trip, my own parents reported me to CPS, told them I was an unfit mother, and had my child taken and placed with strangers. By the time I got home, she was already gone, and everyone believed their version of me. Chapter 1. They said she was safe. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was how quiet the house felt. Not peaceful quiet, not the kind that settles after a long day. This was the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, like something had been paused mid-breath and never resumed. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and listened for her. Nothing. No footsteps running down the hallway, no small voice calling out Mom, no cartoon noise leaking from the living room. Just silence. I set my bag down more slowly than I meant to, like I was trying not to disturb something fragile I couldn't see. The air smelled faintly of chamomile. There was a mug sitting by the sink, tea gone cold, a thin skin forming across the surface. That's when my chest tightened. I stepped further inside. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother stood by the counter, her hands resting flat against the marble, like she had just finished something and didn't know what to do next. My father leaned back slightly, arms crossed, watching me in that calm, measured way he had always had. He looked up first. "You're back," he said. Not, "How was your trip?" Not, "We missed you," not even, "You're home," just, "You're back." Like I had stepped out to the pharmacy, not flown across state lines for 4 days. I forced a small smile out of habit, because there are scripts you learn growing up in a house like this, and your body remembers them even when your mind is trying to catch up. "Where's Caroline?" I asked. My mother didn't answer right away. She picked up a spoon from the counter, then set it down again without using it. My father didn't move at all. Something shifted. It wasn't loud. No one gasped. No one panicked. The air just changed. It was subtle, but it hit me all at once, like stepping into a room where an argument had just ended seconds before you arrived. I felt it in my stomach before I understood it. "Where is she?" I repeated, my voice sharper this time. My mother wiped her hands slowly on a dish towel, buying time in a way that made my skin crawl. "Okay," she said carefully, "we need to talk about that." Every muscle in my body went cold. "What happened?" She didn't answer. She gestured toward the table. "Sit down, Hannah." I didn't move. "No, you can tell me standing up." My father stepped in then, his tone controlled, almost soothing. "Hannah, just sit so we can explain this properly." The way he said "properly" made something in me snap tighter. "Explain what?" I said. "Where is my daughter?" My mother finally met my eyes. "She's safe." The word hit harder than anything else they could have said. Safe meant something had already gone wrong. Safe meant I was late. My hand went to the back of the nearest chair just to steady myself. "Safe how?" I said. "Is she sick? Did something happen? Is she at the hospital?" "Nothing like that," my father said quickly. "Then where is she?" Neither of them answered right away. That was when I knew. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't panic. This was something they had already discussed, already decided, already rehearsed. They had a version of this conversation in their heads before I even walked through the door. I felt my legs start to shake, so I sat, not because they told me to, but because I needed to stay upright long enough to hear what they had done. My mother took the chair across from me. My father stayed standing, arms still folded like some neutral observer at a meeting he had nothing to do with. "We've been thinking for a while," my mother began, "that you haven't been managing very well." For a second, I just stared at her. The sentence didn't fit the moment. It didn't fit the fact that my daughter was not in the next room. "Managing what?" She kept going anyway. "You work too much. You're always stretched thin. Caroline needs stability, Hannah. She needs consistency. I let out a short, disbelieving breath. You begged me to take that trip. I said you wanted time with her. That's not the point, my father cut in. Then what is the point? My voice was rising now, but they stayed exactly the same, calm, measured, reasonable. That was the worst part. My mother lifted her chin slightly. We did what we thought was best. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. Where is she? My father answered this time, slower, like he was choosing each word carefully. She's with a nice family. For a second, my brain refused to process it. A nice family. The words floated there, disconnected from reality. What family? I said. He repeated it slower. A nice family. Like I was the one not understanding something obvious. My mother leaned back in her chair. It's better this way. That was when the floor dropped out from under me. At first, they avoided the word. They kept circling around it. Placement, a home, people experienced with children. I talked over every single one of them. Who authorized this? What did you tell them? Where did you take her? My voice was getting louder, faster, but they stayed exactly the same, calm. That calm wasn't kindness, it was control. Finally, my mother lost patience. We told them the truth, she said, that you weren't away, that you left her here without a clear plan, that the situation had become unstable. I blinked at her. I was gone for 4 days. My father shrugged slightly. You weren't here. That was when everything snapped into place. They had pushed me to take the trip. They had insisted I needed it, that work was important, that they would handle everything. And while I was gone, while I was calling every night and being told she was in the bath or asleep or busy, they had already decided what story they were going to tell. You told them I abandoned her, I said. Neither of them answered directly. They didn't have to. My mother just said, she's being looked after. I pushed my chair back so hard it scraped across the floor. Looked after by who? People who know how to provide what she needs, my father said. Better than me? I said. Neither of them corrected me. That silence was louder than anything they could have said. You think I'm not enough? My mother's expression softened, but it didn't reach her eyes. We think she deserves stability. Every word was chosen to sound reasonable, careful, thoughtful, but underneath it, there was something else. Judgment. You've always struggled with balance, work, emotions, consistency. This isn't new, Hannah. I felt something inside me start to shift. The panic was still there, but it was changing shape, hardening. You planned this, I said quietly. My father exhaled like he was tired of the conversation already. We prepared for what might happen. You prepared a report? We told Child Services the truth, my mother said, that you weren't managing. The words landed differently this time. Not chaotic, not overwhelming, clear. They hadn't panicked. They had built a case. They had watched me, documented me, waited for the moment they could frame it all as something else. I looked at both of them, really looked this time, and saw it. They weren't worried. They were certain. Certain they were right. Certain they had done the right thing. Certain I would react exactly they expected. Maybe cry, maybe argue, maybe collapse. Something they could point to and say, see? I didn't do any of that. My hands were still shaking, but my voice wasn't anymore. Which agency? My father frowned slightly. Hannah, you need to calm down and approach this the right way. You already did it your way, I said. Now it's my turn. My mother tried again, softer this time. They're not just going to hand her back to you. There are procedures. I stood up. Then I'll learn the procedures. She opened her mouth to continue, but I cut her off. The name and the caseworker. For the first time since I walked in, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not guilt, uncertainty. Because I wasn't reacting the way they expected. My father looked at her, then back at me. Midwest Child Services. Caseworker's name is Dana Collins. I nodded once. Good. My mother stood quickly as I reached for my bag. Hannah, listen to me. If you go in here like this, you could make things worse. I turned back toward her. You already did that. She stopped. The room felt different now. Not quiet anymore. Clear. I walked out of the house without looking back, the echo of their calm voices still sitting in my chest, but something else rising underneath it. Not panic, not fear. Focus. Because whatever they thought they had done, whatever story they had told, whatever version of me they had handed over to strangers, they had made one mistake. They thought I would break. They didn't realize I was about to start proving them wrong.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Report They Filed. The drive across the city felt longer than it should have, even though I knew every turn by instinct. Traffic lights blurred together, red to green to yellow, none of it sticking long enough for me to register. My hand stayed locked on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, my thoughts moving faster than the cars around me. Midwest Child Services. I said the name in my head over and over, like if I repeated it enough times, it would start to make sense. My phone buzzed somewhere in the passenger seat. I ignored it at first, but it kept vibrating, insistent, pulling me out of the narrow tunnel of focus I was trying to hold on to. At the next light, I glanced down. It was my boss. We need you fully present next week. The message sat there, clean and simple, like the rest of my life hadn't just been pulled apart in the last 10 minutes. I stared at it for a second, then flipped the phone over without replying. There was nothing I could say that would make sense, not right now. The building came into view sooner than I expected, a low, gray structure tucked between a medical office and a county administration building. It didn't look threatening. It didn't look like the kind of place that could decide whether you were a good mother or not. That almost made it worse. I parked too quickly, the tires brushing the curb harder than they should have. For a second, I just sat there, hands still on the wheel, heart pounding against my ribs. This was real. Caroline was somewhere inside a system that had already decided something about me, something I hadn't even been given the chance to defend yet. I stepped out of the car and forced myself to walk, not run. Inside, the air was cooler, sterile. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A reception desk sat at the far end of the lobby, a woman typing behind it without looking up. I approached, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm here about my daughter, Caroline Reed. The receptionist glanced up, then down at her screen, fingers moving quickly. One moment, she picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then nodded. Someone will be with you shortly. I sat in one of the plastic chairs lining the wall. Every second stretched. I watched the door behind the desk, waiting for it to open, for someone to come out and tell me where my child was. When it finally did, the woman who stepped through wasn't what I expected. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, dressed in a simple navy blazer, her hair pulled back neatly. No expression, no warmth, just focus. Hannah Reed? I stood immediately. Yes, I'm Dana Collins. I'm the caseworker assigned to your file. Assigned to your file. The words hit harder than I expected. She gestured toward a hallway. Come with me. I followed her past a row of closed doors, the sound of our footsteps echoing faintly against the linoleum floor. She led me into a small office, barely more than a desk, 2 chairs, and a computer. She sat first, motioning for me to take the chair across from her. I didn't wait. Where is my daughter? Dana folded her hands together on the desk, her posture straight, controlled. Caroline is currently in a temporary placement. Temporary placement. Not with my parents, not with anyone I knew, with strangers. Why? She didn't react to the edge in my voice. We received a report that your child was left without a clear care plan. The words were clinical, rehearsed, like she had said them 100 times before. I leaned forward. I was gone for 4 days. 4. I left her with her grandparents. I called every single day. Dana's gaze didn't waver. We are required to treat every report seriously until proven otherwise. The phrase landed like a wall. Until proven otherwise. So right now, in this moment, I wasn't the mother who had arranged care, who had checked in, who had done everything she thought was right. I was the mother who had to prove she wasn't neglectful. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. Then prove it. Look at the call logs. Look at anything. I didn't disappear. She reached for a folder on her desk, opened it, and slid a sheet of paper slightly toward me, just enough for me to see the shape of it. This report has been categorized as high concern. The words sat there between us. High concern. Which means what exactly? It means, she said evenly, that based on the information we received, there is a potential risk to the child's stability and well-being. Risk. The word made my chest tighten again. Dana continued, her tone unchanged. This is a temporary protective hold. Caroline is safe, she is being cared for, and she is not in immediate danger. However, if we confirm that there is instability in her primary care environment, that hold can be extended. Extended? For how long? As long as necessary. There was no emotion in the answer, no apology, just procedure. I felt something rise in me then, sharp and immediate. This is insane. You're telling me that because I went on a work trip, something my parents encouraged, you took my daughter and placed her with strangers? We acted on a report, she said, and until we verify all information, we have to prioritize the child's safety. Safety. That word again. My phone buzzed in my hand this time. I hadn't even realized I was holding it. I glanced down. A message from my neighbor, Lisa. We heard about Caroline. I hope everything is okay. My stomach dropped. Heard about? My parents hadn't just filed a report. They had told people. They had already started building a version of me that existed outside of this room. I set the phone face down on my lap. Dana watched the movement, but didn't comment. I leaned back slightly, forcing myself to breathe slower. Okay, I said, my voice quieter now, more deliberate. Then let's verify it. Her expression didn't change, but there was a slight pause. I can provide my call logs, my emails, my flight information, every single thing that shows where I was and what I was doing. She studied me for a moment, like she was reassessing something. Those can be submitted, she said. Good, because I'm not going to sit here and let a report define me when it's wrong. She nodded once. You can submit any supporting documentation. We will review it as part of the investigation. Investigation. The words settled in. This wasn't over. This wasn't decided. But it wasn't simple. I stood slowly, my movements controlled now, deliberate. Where is she? Dana hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Her placement location is confidential at this stage. My chest tightened again, but I didn't let it show. Will I be able to see her? That will depend on how the review progresses. Another wall, another condition, another step I had to earn. I picked up my phone, my bag, grounding myself in the physical act of movement. Then we're going to move that review forward, I said. Dana watched me carefully. You should also be aware, she added, that escalation without cooperation can complicate the process. I met her gaze. I'm not escalating, I'm correcting. There was a brief silence between us. Then she nodded once. Submit your documentation. We'll proceed from there. I turned and walked out of the office, back through the hallway, past the same closed doors, the same humming lights. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't, because now I knew exactly what I was up against. A system that didn't know me, a report that defined me, and two people who decided I wasn't enough. I stepped outside, the air hitting my face, sharp and real. For a moment, I closed my eyes. Then I took a slow breath in and another out. I didn't need to explain anymore. I needed to prove. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 3. Proving I wasn't the problem. The moment I got back into my car, I didn't start driving right away. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, trying to recognize the version of me they had just described. Unstable, unreachable, unfit. It didn't feel real, but it didn't need to feel real. It only needed to be documented. I reached for my phone and unlocked it, my fingers moving faster now, sharper, like something had clicked into place. Call logs. I opened the history and scrolled. Every night, every single night. There were the timestamps: 7:30, 8:15, 9:02. Each call to Caroline, each call to my parents. Some short, some longer. But they were there. I took screenshots, one after another, not even pausing to review them yet. Then messages. I searched my mother's name. The thread loaded and I started scrolling upward. There it was. Her words from a week ago. "You should take this trip. It's good for your career. We've got Caroline. Don't worry about a thing. Take the time. You deserve it." I stared at the screen for a second longer than I needed to, something twisting in my chest, then captured that too. More screenshots. Then my email. I opened my work inbox, pulled up the confirmation from the trip, flight details, departure time, return ticket, everything precise, everything time-stamped, everything real. I leaned back in the seat, exhaling slowly, trying to steady the rhythm of my breathing. This was no longer about arguing. This was about building a timeline. I started the car. The next place I needed to go wasn't back home. It wasn't even back to CPS. I needed someone who understood how this worked. Laura Bennett's office was downtown, on the 12th floor of a building I had passed 100 times without ever noticing. Now it felt like the only place that made sense. The receptionist barely looked up when I gave my name, but within minutes I was being led into a glass-walled office where Laura stood waiting. She was exactly what I needed. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, no wasted movement. The kind of presence that didn't try to comfort you, just assess you. "Hannah Reed," she said, extending her hand. "Yes." I shook it, my grip firmer than I expected. "I was told you needed urgent counsel." I sat down across from her. "My parents reported me to CPS. They said I abandoned my daughter." She didn't react emotionally. She didn't widen her eyes or shake her head. She just nodded once, like this was a problem she had seen before. "And did you?" "No." "Good." She sat, folding her hands together. "Then we don't argue, we prove." I swallowed, then pushed my phone across the desk. "I have call logs, messages, emails, flight confirmations." She picked up the phone, scrawling quickly, her eyes moving with practiced precision. "This is a good start." Start. The word made something tighten in my chest. I added, "They said I was unreachable, that I didn't have a plan." Laura glanced up. "Did you leave anything in writing?" "No." She nodded again, not judgmental, just noting it. "Then they're going to lean on that." Of course they would. She set the phone down. "Listen carefully, Hannah." Her voice was calm, direct. "This isn't about truth. It's about what you can prove." I let that sink in, because part of me still wanted to believe that if I just explained it, if I just told someone what really happened, it would be enough. It wasn't. "You build a timeline," she continued. "Every call, every message, every movement. You make it impossible for their version to stand without collapsing." I nodded slowly. "And the gaps," she added. My stomach dropped slightly. "There's always gaps. We control them. We explain them before they use them." I thought about the missed call. 1 hour. That was all it took to turn me into someone else. "I'll get everything," I said. Laura gave a small nod. "Good. And when you go back, you don't argue. You present." I stood, already moving. "Thank you." She didn't stop me. "Just one more thing," she said as I reached the door. I turned and nodded. "Stay calm. The second you lose control, you become exactly what they said you are." I held her gaze for a second, then nodded. "I won't." By the time I got back to Midwest Child Services, the sun had shifted, shadows stretching longer across the parking lot. I walked in the same way I had before, but this time I didn't hesitate. I asked for Dana Collins. A few minutes later, I was back in the same chair across from the same desk. She looked up as I placed my phone and a small stack of printed pages in front of her. I have documentation. She didn't react immediately, just reached forward and began reviewing. Call logs first. Her eyes moved across the screen, then to the printed pages. Messages next? I watched her expression carefully, looking for anything, any shift. Then emails, flight confirmations. Everything lined up. Every piece of my life reduced to proof. She set one of the pages aside. There's a gap here. Of course there was. 1 hour, I said, before she could continue. I missed a call. I called back within the hour. She glanced at the log again. The report indicates multiple instances of unavailability. Because they chose what to include, I said, my voice steady. She didn't react right away. Instead, she leaned back slightly, folding her hands again. These can be interpreted differently. The words landed harder this time, not because I didn't expect them, because I did. Interpretation. That was the battlefield. They interpreted my absence as neglect. I had to make sure it couldn't be seen that way. Then interpret them with the full timeline, I said. She studied me for a moment. I didn't look away. Something shifted just slightly. Not trust, but attention. She picked up another page, scanning it again. Your parents reported that you encouraged you to stay longer. They encouraged me to go, not to stay. She flipped back to the messages, reading more carefully now. Her brow tightened just a fraction. Then she turned to the report again. The timeline, she didn't finish the sentence, but I saw it. The hesitation. That was all I needed, because hesitation meant doubt, and doubt meant movement. While she reviewed, my mind drifted for a second, not away from the room, but backward, to every time my parents had said I was too much, too emotional, too distracted, to every time they had stepped in, corrected, adjusted, taken over. You've always had trouble keeping things stable, my mother had said once, years ago after I worked a late night. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now it felt like a pattern, a narrative, one they had been building long before this. Dana set the papers down slowly. This timeline doesn't fully align with the report. There it was. Not a conclusion, but a crack. I leaned forward slightly, because it wasn't a mistake. She looked at me. I held her gaze. They didn't misunderstand me, I said quietly. They replaced me.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The System That Almost Took Her. The words stayed with me long after I left her office, not echoing, not loud, just sitting there, solid and undeniable. It wasn't about confusion anymore. It wasn't even about disagreement. It was about intention. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car again, the same way I had before, but this time my hands were still, my breathing even. The panic had burned through. What was left was something colder, something sharper. My phone rang. I almost ignored it, but the number was unfamiliar, local. I answered. This is Hannah Reed. There was a pause on the other end, then a voice I didn't recognize. Hi, this is Miss Carter from Lincoln Elementary. I'm Caroline's teacher. My grip tightened around the phone. Yes? We've been notified that Caroline is currently in temporary placement, she said, her tone careful, almost hesitant. I just wanted to check if everything is okay. The words sounded polite, but underneath them there was something else. Concern, distance, a subtle shift in how I was being seen. Everything is being handled, I said, keeping my voice steady. Of course, she replied quickly. If there's anything we should know or if Caroline needs additional support when she returns, please let us know. When she returns. I swallowed. Thank you.
I will." We ended the call, but the feeling didn't go away. It spread, because it wasn't just CPS anymore. It was school. It was neighbors. It was anyone who heard a version of the story before I had the chance to speak. My phone buzzed again, another message, this time from someone in my building. "Hope things get better soon." No question, no context, just assumption. I stared at the screen for a second, then locked it. They had already started shaping the narrative, and it was working. By the time I pulled into my office parking lot, I almost didn't want to go inside, but avoiding it wouldn't change anything. I needed to see how far this had spread. The moment I walked in, I felt it. It wasn't obvious. No one stopped talking, no one pointed, but there were glances, quick, subtle, not meant to be noticed, which made them impossible to ignore. I kept walking. My boss's office door was open. He looked up as I passed. "Hannah, can you step in for a minute?" I stopped, turned, and walked in. He closed the door behind me. "You've been out a few days," he said, his tone measured. "I assume everything is under control." I held his gaze. "Not yet." He exhaled slowly, then leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to be direct with you." Of course he was. "If your personal life is affecting your availability, we need to reconsider your role moving forward." There it was. Clean, professional, controlled, but underneath it the same thing I had heard all day. Doubt. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Not because I didn't have an explanation, because I knew it wouldn't matter here. Not yet. "I understand," I said. He studied me for a moment, maybe expecting more, maybe expecting to defend myself. I didn't. "I'll keep you updated," I added. Then I left. Back in my car again, I sat in silence, letting the weight of everything settle. CPS, school, work, all of it shifting at the same time, all of it based on something that wasn't true, but was written down. That was the difference. I picked up my phone and called Laura. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me you have something." "They're reviewing the report," I said. "There are inconsistencies." "Good. But it's not enough yet." It never is. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling of the car. "They built a narrative," I said. "Not just a report, a pattern." There was a brief pause on the line. Then Laura spoke again, her tone sharper now. "What do you mean?" I told her about the timeline, the gaps, the way things had been framed. Then I added something else. "They've been saying this for years." Silence. Then Laura said quietly, "That's not just a report. That's positioning." "Exactly." "We need to push this into a formal review," she continued. "Request a hearing. Force everything onto record." "How long?" "Depends on how aggressive we are." I didn't hesitate. "Be aggressive." "Good," she said. "I'll file the request today." I ended the call and sat there for a moment longer. A hearing meant this wasn't going away quietly. It meant everything would be examined, every detail, every word, every version. I started the car. This time I knew exactly where I was going. Back to my parents' house. The same street, the same front door. But it didn't feel the same. I walked in without knocking. They were in the living room this time. My mother looked up first. "Hannah." My father followed, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't just walk in like that." I ignored him. "You documented me." Neither of them reacted. "You kept records. You tracked when I was working, when I wasn't home." My mother stood slowly. "We observed patterns." Patterns. The word almost made me laugh. "You built a case." "We told the truth," she said, calmly. "No." I shook my head slightly. "You curated it." My father stepped forward a little. "Watch your tone." I met his eyes. "No." For the first time, I didn't lower mine. "You watch yours." There was a brief silence. Then my mother spoke again, softer now. "You're reacting emotionally." That almost broke me. Not because it hurt, Because it was so predictable, so consistent, exactly what they had always said, exactly what they had used. I took a breath, slow and controlled. "No," I said. "I'm reacting clearly." She tilted her head slightly. "Caroline deserves better than instability." There it was, the sentence, the one they had been building toward, the one they probably had said to someone else already. "She deserves better than you." It landed, sharp and precise. For a second, I felt it, the old version of me, the one that would defend, argue, try to prove something through emotion. But I didn't. I let the silence sit. Then I nodded once. "You're right," I said. Both of them blinked, caught off guard. "She deserves better than instability." I stepped closer. "Which is exactly why this ends now." My father frowned. "You don't decide that." I already did. I turned and walked out. This time I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was stepping into something, a process, a system, one that didn't care about feelings, only proof. The next day passed through a blur of calls, emails, and documents. Laura confirmed the hearing request had been filed. CPS began a deeper review. And for the first time, things started to shift. Not dramatically, not visibly, but enough. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Dana Collins. I answered immediately. "Hannah." Her voice sounded different, less neutral. "There are inconsistencies in their statements."
Chapter 5. When the Truth Doesn't Need a Voice. The hearing was scheduled faster than I expected. Not immediately, not urgently, but fast enough that it felt like the system had decided this couldn't sit unresolved for long. I arrived early. The building was different from the CPS office. Taller, quieter, heavier in a way that pressed down on everything inside it. The kind of place where voices lowered without being told to. Laura was already there, standing near the hallway outside the hearing room, a folder tucked neatly under her arm. She looked at me once, quickly, assessing. "You ready?" I nodded. "Yes." She held my gaze for a second longer. "Remember what we talked about." I didn't need her to repeat it. Stay calm. Present, don't react. I followed her inside. The room was smaller than I expected. Not a courtroom like on television, no raised benches or dramatic space, just a long table, a few chairs, and a judge seated at the front, already reviewing paperwork. My parents were there. They were sitting side by side, composed, dressed like they were attending something formal, something important, not like they were defending what they had done. My mother met my eyes first. There was no apology there, no hesitation, just the same certainty. My father didn't look at me at all. Laura pulled out a chair beside her. "Sit." I did. The judge looked up briefly. "We'll begin shortly." No introduction, no warmth, just process. Dana was there too, seated slightly to the side, her posture straight, her file open in front of her. When her eyes met mine, there was something different now. Not neutrality, attention. The hearing started without ceremony. Laura spoke first, her voice clear, controlled. "We are here to review the basis for the temporary protective hold placed on Caroline Reed and to address inconsistencies in the initial report." No dramatics, no emotion, just facts. The judge nodded slightly. "Proceed." Laura began laying out the timeline. Call logs, messages, flight confirmations, each piece presented, not rushed, not emphasized, just placed in order. I watched as the narrative shifted, not through argument, but through structure. This happened, then this, then this. Everything connected, everything visible. Then the other side spoke. My parents had legal representation. I hadn't even realized they would, but of course they did. The man standing across from us was calm, polished, and precise. He didn't attack me. He didn't need to. He reframed me.
While Miss Reed has provided documentation, there are still periods of unavailability that raise concern regarding consistent parental presence. There it was again, unavailability, the word that turned hours into absence. He turned slightly toward me. Miss Reed, why were you unavailable at this time? The question landed clean. No accusation, no emotion, just pressure. For a split second, everything tightened again. The room, the air, my chest. This was the moment they were waiting for. The moment where I would explain, where I would sound defensive, where I would become what they had already described. I felt it rising, the instinct to justify, to correct, to prove through emotion. Then I remembered Laura's voice. We don't argue, we prove. I inhaled slowly, then answered. I was in transit between meetings. I returned the call within the hour, as reflected in the call log. My voice didn't shake. I didn't add anything else. The attorney nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the answer, but not accepting it. And during that hour, your parents were solely responsible for the child, correct? Yes. And they reported concern? They reported aversion, I said before I could stop myself. Laura's hand shifted slightly beside me, a subtle warning. I stopped. The judge looked at me briefly, then back to the documents. Continue, he said. The questioning moved on. But something had shifted. Not in the room, in me. Because I hadn't broken, I hadn't over-explained. I had stayed where I needed to be. Then Dama spoke. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now. Based on the documentation provided and a review of the initial report, there are discrepancies in the timeline presented by the reporting parties. Reporting parties, not parents, not family, something more distant, more official. She continued, the frequency of contacts between Miss Reed and her child does not support the claim of prolonged unreachability. The room grew quieter. My mother shifted slightly in her seat. My father's jaw tightened, just enough for me to notice. Dana turned a page in her file. Additionally, certain events appear to have been selectively documented, which affects the overall interpretation of the situation. Selectively documented. Not false, not yet, but close. The attorney for my parents stepped forward again. With respect, the concern was not solely about communication, but about long-term stability and parental availability. He was trying to pull it back, to widen the frame, to make it about something harder to measure. The judge leaned back slightly, considering. Then he spoke. The court will require a full review of the report and supporting documentation before any extension of the protective hold is considered. Not a decision, not a conclusion, but not what my parents wanted, not what they expected. Laura leaned slightly toward me. That's movement, she said quietly. I didn't respond, because I could feel it, the shift, small but real. The judge continued. Pending that review, visitation and custody arrangements will be reassessed. My heart stopped for half a second. Reassessed, not denied, not confirmed, open. Then it happened. Dana closed her file and spoke again. Given the current inconsistencies, I recommend that the child be returned to the primary caregiver on a provisional basis, pending final review. Everything went still, completely still. My mother turned toward her, the calm finally cracking. That's not appropriate, she said. The judge raised a hand slightly. Order. My father leaned forward, his voice tighter now. This is about the child's well-being. Dana didn't look at them. This is about the accuracy of the report. The difference between those two sentences hung in the air. The judge nodded once. The recommendation will be considered. Another pause, another breath held too long. Then he spoke. The child will be returned on a provisional basis pending final determination. I didn't move, not right away, because for a second I wasn't sure I had heard it correctly. Returned, provisional, not permanent, not taken, not replaced. Something inside me shifted again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was quiet,
heavy, real. The hearing ended without ceremony. No one stood dramatically, no one spoke loudly. It just closed, like a door. I stayed seated for a moment longer than I needed to. Laura touched my arm lightly. "You did exactly what you needed to do." I nodded once. Across the room, my parents were speaking quietly with their attorney. Their posture was different now, not composed, not certain, adjusted. For the first time, they didn't look like they were in control. Dana approached me as I stood. She didn't smile, she didn't soften, but she met my eyes directly. "This isn't over yet," she said. "I know, but it's moving in the right direction." I held her gaze for a second, then nodded. "Thank you." She gave a small nod in return. Procedure. Always procedure. I walked out of the room, the hallway stretching in front of me, the weight of everything still sitting in my chest. But it felt different now. Not like something pressing down, like something settling into place. Somewhere in the building, Caroline was waiting, not permanently returned, not fully decided, but closer. And for the first time since I walked into that kitchen, since I heard the word safe, since everything shifted without my consent, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was controlling it.
Chapter 6. They said I wasn't enough. The first time I saw her again, she didn't run. She stood still. For a second, I thought I had imagined it, that I had built up the moment so much in my head that reality couldn't match it. She was standing near the doorway, small, shoulders slightly hunched, her hands gripping the hem of her sweater like she wasn't sure what she was allowed to do. Then her eyes found mine, and everything else disappeared. "Mom!" It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was certain. I moved toward her, slower than I wanted to, like I was afraid if I went too fast, the moment would break. When I reached her, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. Tight, stronger than I expected. I dropped down slightly to hold her, my arms closing around her back, feeling the weight of her, the warmth, the reality. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought everything that had been building would finally break through, but it didn't. It settled. Right there, in that moment, everything that had been loud and chaotic and overwhelming just stopped. "I knew you'd come," she said quietly against my shoulder. I closed my eyes for a second. "I always will," I said. That part didn't need proof. The next few days moved differently. Not fast, not slow, just steady. The final review happened without me needing to be there. Laura called me instead. "They're closing the case," she said. I sat down as soon as I heard it, not because I couldn't stand, but because I needed to feel the weight of it somewhere. "Say that again?" "The custody is being fully restored. No extension, no conditions." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for days. "Based on the inconsistencies in the report and the documentation you provided, there's no basis to continue the hold." No basis. Simple words, but they carried everything. "And my parents?" There was a pause on the other end. "They're being flagged for false reporting concerns," Laura said. "It doesn't automatically mean charges, but it does mean their credibility with CPS is compromised, and any future reports from them will be scrutinized heavily." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "And contact?" "Limited," she said. "Supervised, if any, depending on how you choose to proceed." How I choose. That was new. That hadn't been mine before. "Thank you," I said. "You did the work," she replied. I ended the call and sat there for a long moment, letting it settle. It wasn't loud. There was no moment where everything suddenly felt perfect, but it was clear, and that was enough. When I walked Caroline into school for the first time after everything, the hallway felt different, not because it had changed, because I had. Miss Carter met us near the classroom door, her smile careful but warmer than before. "We're so glad to have you back," she said. Caroline squeezed my hand once before letting go and stepping inside. She didn't look back. She didn't need to.
As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of two parents standing near the lockers. They looked at me, then quickly away. But this time, it didn't land the same, because whatever version of the story they had heard, it wasn't the only one anymore, and more importantly, it wasn't the one that mattered. Outside, the air felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, because it was mine again. At work, the conversation went exactly the way I expected. My boss sat across from me, the same posture, the same measured tone. "I understand things have been resolved." "They have." He nodded. "Are you ready to return to full capacity?" I held his gaze for a second. "No." It surprised him. I could see it in the way his expression shifted just slightly. "I'm going to be adjusting my schedule and my priorities." He leaned back. "That may impact your position here." "I understand." For the first time, I meant it. Not as a defense, not as an apology, just a fact. He studied me, then nodded slowly. "Keep me informed." "I will." I left the office without feeling like I had lost something, because I hadn't. I had chosen, and that was different. The last time I saw my parents wasn't in a courtroom. It was outside my house. They didn't come in. They didn't try. They stood on the porch, waiting. My mother spoke first. "We need to talk." I stayed inside, the door half open. "No," I said. Her expression tightened. "You can't just shut us out." I met her eyes. "You shut me out first." My father stepped forward slightly. "We did what we thought was best." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded once. "I know." That seemed to catch them off guard more than anything else, because I wasn't fighting them. I wasn't trying to convince them. I wasn't asking them to understand. I stepped back and closed the door, not out of anger, out of clarity. That night, after Caroline had gone to bed, I sat in the living room alone, the house quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It wasn't empty waiting for something to go wrong. It was settled. I thought about everything that had happened, how quickly things had shifted, how easily a version of me had been created that didn't match who I was, how close I had come to losing something I couldn't replace, and how the only thing that changed the outcome wasn't how I felt, it's what I could prove. Caroline stirred slightly down the hall, and I listened for a second, the instinct automatic now. Then I leaned back, letting the silence sit. They said she was safe. They just didn't mean with me. If you were in my place, if the people you trusted the most decided you weren't enough, would you fight to prove them wrong, or would you let their version of you become the truth?